Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anna, for the lovely introduction. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to the research organizers for giving me the opportunity to talk about my research, which was done on a very small scale, but I'm following Tommy Gorman, so that's going to be a very tough act to follow. So if you want to zone out, that's fine with me. So my research was titled The Extent to Which Equality, Diversity and Inclusivity is Incorporated into the Simulation Training in the Undergraduate Medical Curriculum. And I did a systematic review of literature as part of my master's in healthcare simulation and patient safety. I just want to give a shout out to Professor Paul O'Connor, who was my supervisor and mentor while doing this research. So is it the middle button, Ian?
Yeah.
Thank you. It's not working. There. Okay, so a good place to start, I thought, would be to go about and explore what is equality, diversity, and inclusivity. So if we talk about equality first, according to the Equality and Human Rights Commission, it defines equality as ensuring that every individual has an equal opportunity to make the most of their lives and talents. The Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland developed their Equality, Diversity, Inclusivity, which I'm going to refer to as EDI from this moment onwards. So they developed their EDI strategy and action plan. And according to this strategy, they define equality as believing that no one should have inferior life opportunities because of where, what, or whom they were born, what they believe, or whether they have a disability. So then the next thing is diversity. So diversity refers to a wide range of individual and social characteristics such as age, race, sex, ethnicity, national or geographic origins, physical, functional, and learning abilities, socioeconomic status, and religious beliefs. And then the last thing to explore is inclusion or inclusivity, but more from an inclusive environment at work. So what that means is that an inclusive environment is one where there is mutual respect, a sense of belonging, which is shared by all employees. There's equal access to opportunities available to all. There's an environment where hard work is recognized and rewarded. There's an appreciation of individual attributes. There's a common goal, but most importantly, people can trust one another, their colleagues, and the systems within their organization. So as Mr. Gorman was saying, the population of Ireland has increased tremendously in the last few years, and that is a lot to do with immigration. And following from that immigration and the increase in population, we see diversity, which is everywhere. So the statement that I've written on this slide, diversity is everywhere, it stems from the shape of society around us. But that diversity is particularly concentrated within the higher education institutions, due partly to the increased enrollment of international students, but also, like I mentioned, because of immigration. But if we cast an eye at our medical schools, the diversity within these medical schools is actually more compared to other educational institutions. And that goes back historically to the harsh economic climate in Ireland in 1980s, when there was not enough budget. So the state funded local medical students. There was a cap on their enrollment, but the international fee-paying students were allowed to come in, and there was no cap on their enrollment. So that grew year on year, which meant that by 2003, actually 62% of the new student take in medical schools were all international students, which provided 83% of the budget for these medical schools. And that this is where all this diversity is coming from. So we have seen that there's diversity in the society as well as diversity in the educational institutions. So once there's diversity in society and in the medical schools, this then translates into a diverse healthcare workforce. So in having to deal with a diverse set of patients, this healthcare workforce needs to be trained in the concepts of this equality, diversity, and inclusivity that I just mentioned. So the question then arises, how do we train them? Simulation has been proven time and time again to be a fantastic method for delivering medical education, not just clinical skills, but also it improves attitudes, beliefs, and thinking. I've mentioned debrief, reflection, and Kolb's cycle here. So if we look at, there are different types of simulation. But if I look at one type of simulation, which is a simulation scenario, it brings into play Kolb's cycles. So what is Kolb, or who is Kolb? So David Kolb is an educational theorist, and his experiential learning theory is extremely well developed. This theory has 4 parts to it. So the first part is concrete experience, which means that students or any learner will get a concrete experience. And in a simulation session or a simulation scenario, that's what we tend to do. So the students get a concrete experience. This is then followed by the second stage, which means reflective observation, or it's labeled reflective observation. So students undergo reflection. They reflect on their knowledge, their behavior, the concepts that they already have in their minds. This then feeds into stage 3, which is abstract conceptualization, which means that whatever reflection that they have done, especially in the debrief where all this reflection is happening, they can either let go of some of the concepts that are already in their head, which may not be correct, and they can form new concepts based on that reflection and the discussion that's happening. The fourth step then is active experimentation, which means that in real life, when they are faced with the same scenario, they can put those new concepts into action and so improve their performance. So simulation has been proven, like I said, to be an extremely useful tool for improving knowledge and skills. So what I recognized was that, okay, we need to give training to this diverse healthcare workforce to be able to deal with a diverse set of patients, and simulation is a good method of training. So why not combine the two? And that was actually the basis for my thesis and my research. I wanted to see whether undergraduate medical students have been given any training in the concepts of EDI via simulation. And from there, my research was born, and I wanted to look and get answers to the following 3 questions. So the first question was, what was the specialty and location of healthcare students being taught the concepts of EDI via simulation? Which elements of EDI have been studied so far? And were the interventions that I studied or that I looked at, what were the outcomes? Were they effective or not? So I'm not going to bore you with my methods for the research. You all know what a systematic review, how it flows. I followed all the protocols. I was interested in results, and I'm going to talk to you about my results. So the first result was location. So where was all this research happening? 100%, all the papers that I reviewed, which actually were more than 100, and then I whittled them down to about 15 in total. So all of that research had happened in developed countries. Not surprising, we all know that developed countries are great at research, but that's extremely unfortunate in my opinion, because healthcare workforce is very diverse. A lot of these individuals, these healthcare personnel, have themselves emigrated from these less affluent developing nations. If they had received EDI training in their own home countries, they would have been better able to assimilate in a foreign culture once they emigrate to the developed world. I myself have been in the same position many years ago, let's say in the last century. We were unaware of the cultural norms when we emigrated here. If I, as that younger person, had received some training, I would have been in a much better position to deal with a diverse set of patients, to deal with my diverse colleagues, diverse to me. So there is diversity everywhere. Like I said, there's also diversity within the developing countries, and we need to tap that healthcare workforce and train them accordingly. So the next result that I looked at was what type of learner and where was the specialty that these learners were being given the training. 93% of the studies showed that it was the nursing students who were being given this EDI training. The reason it is not 100% is that one study looked at the diversity within all the equipment that we use for simulation. So there were no people involved in that study. Only 13% of studies, which means 2 out of the 15 studies, looked at medical students, and then again, not exclusively, but in combination with nursing students. And similarly, other professions such as lab technicians, physiotherapists, they included only 26.6%, and again, not exclusively, but in combination with the nursing students. So as I was compiling these results, I kept asking myself why. Why is it that nursing students and the nursing profession is so good at doing all this research? And it's not the medical profession is not really good at doing research. It is becoming better, but in this particular subject, I found them lacking. The answer that came into my head was probably because traditionally the nursing approach is a more holistic approach. So they look at the patient as a whole. The medical approach is more disease oriented. So probably we attack the disease and we kind of forget about the patient. The other reason I thought was because I'm involved in undergraduate medical education heavily. It is extremely content heavy. There's always a perpetual race against time to deliver it and to finish it. This leaves very little room to deliver anything else outside of the curriculum. So probably that's one of the reasons where EDI training has lacked. Nobody has looked at EDI training via simulation being delivered to undergraduate medical students. The next set of results was what elements of EDI have been studied in literature so far. Half of the studies looked at improving cultural competence or cultural awareness, which is fantastic. So we have a diverse set of population, which means we have diverse set of patients. There's a diverse healthcare workforce, and all of these people need to be aware of their others' culture, their cultural sensitivities, and the proper way to even communicate with a diverse set of patients. Only 3 studies looked at LGBT, LGBTQ+, and TGNC, which stands for transgender and gender non-conforming issues. And the issues here were mostly related to communication. How do I properly address individuals from these communities? What is the proper terminology? How do I properly take a history, something like a sexual history? How do I do that? So it was these skills that were being looked at. Then only 1 study each looked at racial bias, stereotypes, intellectual and physical disabilities. And the last bullet point is that there was just a mere mention of things like substance and elder abuse, intimate partner violence, homelessness, poverty, etc. So half the studies looked at cultural competence. However, EDI is much broader than this. There are so many other aspects of EDI that we probably should be looking at, such as weight stigma, age discrimination, and there's something else that I came across, health inequality, especially in the COVID era, that became extremely apparent. So maybe we need to move away from this culture, which is brilliant, fantastic. It's now becoming normal to train people in the concepts of cultural competence, but we probably need to look at all these other aspects as well. And then the last thing that I looked at was whether the studies that I reviewed, were there any measurable outcomes? Okay, so 10 studies out of the 15 met this criteria. What does this mean? Kirkpatrick's evaluation hierarchy. Okay, so Donald Kirkpatrick was a professor in the University of Wisconsin, and he developed this model whereby we evaluate any training given to any learners. And according to his model, there are 4 levels by which we can measure any outcomes. Level 1 is reactions, which means the degree to which the participants that are undertaking that training, whether they find it engaging or whether they find it was useful. Level 2 is learning, which means the degree to which the participants think that I have acquired the knowledge that was intended within this training course. The knowledge that was intended, have I acquired it? That is level 2 learning. Level 3 is behavior, the degree to which that knowledge then changes behavior on the ground within the learners. And level 4 is results, whether there are changes in the organization in which the learner is working as a result of that as a result of that training. So 80% of the studies showed that learners did acquire all the skills that were intended to be delivered to them. And 20%, only 2 studies showed that they generated reactions within the learners. So the significance of this research, I think, is that because we have an increasingly ethnically and culturally diverse world, the same diversity is in society, patient population, education institutions, especially the medical schools, as well as the healthcare workforce. So our healthcare workforce needs to be trained in the EDI concept, but that training needs to start early on at the undergraduate level, and it needs to be on a continuous ongoing basis, similar to like your continuous medical education, or CME. Only then it will be as effective as we want it to be. SBE stands for simulation-based education. It is useful for improving not just clinical skills, but behaviors as well as attitude, because of all the reflection that goes on in the background. So it is a powerful tool for promoting self-reflection and awareness, which can be a means for changing clinical practice. Future research, as I pointed out, developing countries are lagging behind in all this EDI research and EDI training via simulation. Simulation is an extremely expensive mode of training, so maybe it is not feasible, but it would be really beneficial to see if we give training for EDI via simulation or via any other modality to the healthcare workforce while they are in their home countries. Then if they emigrate to the developed countries, is there a change in the way that they interact with the patients or with the local population here? And then conducting and reviewing EDI training specifically for medical students, because like I said, only 2 studies included medical students. And again, interprofessional education, which is extremely important because patient care is a team responsibility, not an individual or an individual professional responsibility. So interprofessional education plays a huge part here. So going forward, based on the results of maybe the current and this possible future research, I think we can make a strong case for incorporating EDI training via simulation in the undergraduate medical curriculum. So thank you very much, and I will be happy to take any questions.
We can have one question only, I'm afraid, because of time, but it was really interesting. Thank you so much. And I was just thinking about the nurses that all came and worked here from the continent, you know, Indian and Pakistani continent, and what a culture shock for them, but also us knowing how to interact, you know,
Exactly.
even there, just in Sligo University Hospital. Has anyone a question? Oh, Adele?
I'm just wondering, have you started to implement a simulation piece, and what is the best one? Obviously, I'm head of the School of Nursing here in St. Angela's, and we do some simulation with our students. I heard one student say our healthcare system is like an orchestra. Our healthcare team is like an orchestra. If we're not all in tune, we don't do a good job. Yeah. So I'm just wondering, from your perspective, what type of approach you intend to take?
So within this piece of work, what I found was that the simulation scenarios with simulated patients, which are basically actors who are given a script and they pretend to be a patient, or else even more importantly, actual real patients who give a lived experience to the students within that simulation session, that was proved time and time again to be the most beneficial way of imparting that EDI training. And the second thing that you asked was, are we doing anything? So there's a curriculum review happening in the University of Galway. The School of Medicine is doing a review of its undergraduate curriculum, and I'm part of that. And based on this research, I'm going to go full throttle for implementing this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.